The easiest bet to lose is the one you make against someone you've never truly seen. On a cold Thursday evening in Manhattan, beneath the warm glow of crystal chandeliers and the quiet melody of a grand piano drifting through Blackstone House, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, conversation slowed to whispers as Nathan Brooks stepped through the entrance. At 39, the billionaire founder of Brooks Dynamics carried the kind of confidence that made people straighten their posture without realizing it. His tailored navy suit, polished Italian shoes, and understated Swiss watch suggested wealth, but it was the certainty in his eyes that drew attention. Nathan believed every person revealed themselves eventually. All it took was the right question, the right amount of pressure, or the right incentive. That belief had become his favorite game. Employees, executives, investors, even strangers, he quietly tested them all, convinced that character could always be measured. As he settled into his usual corner table, the restaurant manager hurried over personally, greeting him with practiced warmth. Nathan acknowledged him with a polite nod before glancing around the elegant dining room, his gaze stopping for only a second on a young waitress carrying a silver tray between crowded tables. Claire Bennett moved with remarkable calm despite the busy dinner rush. She never rushed, never appeared flustered, never competed for attention. Her blonde hair was tied neatly behind her head, and her simple black uniform blended into the restaurant as if she intended to disappear into the background. Yet every guest she served seemed to relax within moments of speaking with her. She remembered names, favorite drinks, dietary preferences, and somehow anticipated requests before anyone voiced them. Most people noticed none of that. Nathan noticed everything. When Claire arrived beside his table, she greeted him with the same gentle professionalism she offered every guest. "Good evening, sir. Welcome back." Her voice was calm, neither impressed nor intimidated. Nathan looked up from the menu, studying her for a moment longer than necessary. "You've served me before." "A few times," Claire answered with a faint smile. "Then you already know what I usually order." "I do. Humor me anyway." Claire recited his order perfectly, including the side he had changed only once nearly 2 months earlier. Nathan leaned back slightly, surprised but unwilling to show it. Impressive memory. "It's part of the job." "No," he replied quietly, folding the menu shut. "It's more than that." Claire simply waited, pen resting lightly above her order pad. She never rushed to fill silence. Nathan had learned that silence often revealed more than conversation. He glanced around the dining room before speaking just loudly enough for nearby guests to overhear. "Tell me, Claire, do you like making bets?" A few heads turned. Nearby diners exchanged curious looks. Claire remained perfectly still. "Not usually." "That's unfortunate," Nathan said with an amused smile. "Because I have one for you." The restaurant grew noticeably quieter. Even the bartender slowed while polishing a glass. Nathan folded his hands on the white tablecloth. "If you can convince me that first impressions are worthless before dessert is served, I'll write you a check for $100,000 tonight." Several guests gasped softly. Someone near the wine display chuckled under his breath. Nathan continued before Claire could answer. "But if you fail, you answer one honest question in front of everyone here. No lies. No avoiding it." Claire's expression never changed. She glanced briefly around the room, noticing dozens of curious eyes fixed on her. Then she looked back at Nathan with quiet composure and asked the one question no one expected. "If I win, Mr. Brooks, are you willing to accept a truth that money can't negotiate?" For the first time that evening, Nathan Brooks did not answer immediately. For several long seconds, Nathan Brooks simply watched her. Around them, the dining room remained unusually quiet. A waiter paused beside the wine station. A couple celebrating an anniversary forgot to continue their conversation. Even the pianist seemed to soften the melody, as though the room itself was waiting for an answer. Nathan finally smiled, although it was smaller than before. "That depends on the truth," he replied. Claire gave a slight nod. "Then I accept your bet." A murmur spread across the restaurant. Most people expected excitement, nervous laughter, or hesitation. Claire offered none of those. She simply wrote his dinner order on the small leather pad exactly as she had done hundreds of times before. "Your appetizer will be ready in about 10 minutes, Mr. Brooks." She turned gracefully and continued toward another table as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Nathan frowned ever so slightly. He had spent years studying negotiations acquisitions, and high-stakes decisions. One pattern never failed. Pressure always changed people. Some became defensive. Others became eager to impress. Claire had become exactly the same. That unsettled him far more than confidence would have. Throughout the next several minutes, he watched her move through the restaurant with effortless composure. She greeted an elderly couple by name before they even reached their seats. She quietly noticed that a young father looked distracted and brought crayons for his daughter without being asked. When one guest accidentally dropped a napkin, Claire replaced it before he realized it had fallen. None of those actions were dramatic. None demanded recognition. Yet every table she left behind seemed lighter than before she arrived. Nathan leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. He was accustomed to measuring success through quarterly reports, market trends, and billion-dollar valuations. Claire appeared to measure success through moments no spreadsheet could ever record. His assistant, Daniel Mercer, who had arrived midway through the evening for a scheduled business dinner, finally took his seat across from him. "Did I miss something?" Daniel asked quietly after noticing the curious glances from nearby diners. Nathan kept his eyes on Claire. "I made a bet." Daniel laughed softly. "Another one? This one is different." "How?" Nathan answered without looking away. "She is not playing the game." Daniel followed his gaze toward Claire. "She is just doing her job." Nathan slowly shook his head. "No. That is exactly what she wants everyone to believe." At that moment, Claire approached another table where an anxious young businessman struggled to choose between two entrees while apologizing repeatedly for taking too long. Instead of rushing him, Claire listened patiently before asking a single question. "Are you celebrating something tonight?" The man smiled for the first time. "Actually, I just signed my first contract after opening my own company." Claire smiled warmly. "Then I think tonight deserves the filet." Moments like this should have a memory attached to them. The young man laughed with relief and closed his menu. Nathan noticed something remarkable. Claire had not sold a meal. She had given the customer a story he would remember. Nathan rested one hand on the table, his curiosity growing stronger with every passing minute. The bet had barely begun, yet he had the uncomfortable feeling that Claire Bennett was not trying to change his opinion at all. She was simply revealing herself one quiet decision at a time, leaving him to question whether his first impression had ever been accurate. Claire returned carrying Nathan's appetizer with the same composed expression she had worn since the evening began. She placed the plate gently before him, aligning the silverware without a wasted movement. Nathan noticed that she never looked hurried, even though nearly every table in the dining room was occupied. It was as if she had discovered a rhythm that no amount of pressure could interrupt. "Everything smells excellent," Daniel said as Claire placed his meal in front of him. "Thank you." Claire smiled politely. "Please let me know if there is anything either of you need." Before she stepped away, Nathan spoke again. "The bet is still on." Claire met his eyes without hesitation. "I have not forgotten." "Then perhaps we should make progress." She folded her order pad against her apron. "I am listening." Nathan leaned forward slightly. "Tell me what you saw the moment I walked through those doors." Daniel glanced between them with growing curiosity. Most people answered Nathan's questions carefully because they knew his reputation. Claire did not appear interested in protecting his opinion of her. She looked toward the entrance for only a brief second, replaying the memory in silence. "You arrived exactly 2 minutes earlier than your reservation." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "That is not difficult to notice." "No," Claire agreed. The difficult part was understanding why. Nathan gestured for her to continue. "Your shoes had small drops of rain on them, but your jacket was completely dry. That meant your driver stopped close enough to the entrance that you barely stepped outside. Your phone remained in your hand instead of your pocket, which suggested you expected an important message before dinner. You looked at your watch only once before sitting down, not because you were impatient, but because you were measuring whether someone else respected your time." Daniel quietly lowered his fork. Nathan's expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened. Claire continued in the same gentle tone. "You greeted the manager by his first name, but you never asked how he was doing. That told me you remember people well, yet efficiency usually comes before conversation. Then you chose the corner table even though the center table has the better view. You like seeing the entire room more than being seen by it." Nathan remained silent. Every observation was accurate. None of them had required privileged information. Claire simply noticed details most people ignored. "Interesting," Nathan finally said. Now tell me something I do not already know about myself. Claire did not answer immediately. Instead, she glanced toward the dining room where a young couple quietly laughed over dessert while an elderly man read the wine list alone beneath a warm lamp. The restaurant seemed alive with hundreds of tiny moments that most guests never noticed. When she looked back at Nathan, her voice softened. You believe every conversation is a negotiation. Nathan blinked once. Go on. You test people because you are searching for certainty. If someone passes your test, you trust them. If they fail, you move on. It protects your business very well. Nathan gave a slow nod. And Claire smiled almost imperceptibly. The problem is that kindness rarely performs well during an examination. The best parts of a person usually appear only after they stop feeling judged. Daniel looked toward Nathan, expecting an immediate reply. Instead, the billionaire sat unusually still, realizing that for the first time in years, someone had not tried to impress him. They had simply understood him. The silence between them lasted only a few seconds, but it felt strangely significant. Nathan picked up his glass of sparkling water without taking his eyes off Claire. During countless board meetings, he had watched seasoned executives lose confidence after a single difficult question. Claire, however, remained exactly as she had been from the beginning of the evening. Calm, attentive, completely present. Nathan placed the glass back on the table. Very well, he said. Observation is one thing. Prediction is another. Claire tilted her head slightly. What would you like me to predict? Nathan smiled with renewed confidence. This was the part of every challenge he enjoyed most. Facts described the past. Predictions exposed the limits of a person's judgment. Within the next 15 minutes, he said, something unexpected will happen in this restaurant. Tell me what it will be. Daniel looked at Nathan with mild surprise. That is impossible. Nathan shrugged. Exactly. Claire glanced around the dining room, but she did not study faces the way Nathan expected. Instead, her attention drifted across the room naturally, almost as if she were listening instead of searching. She noticed a hostess quietly adjusting another reservation. She noticed a chef stepping briefly through the kitchen doors with a concerned expression before disappearing again. She noticed an elderly gentleman rubbing his hands together while looking toward the entrance every few moments. She noticed details that seemed too ordinary to matter. Nathan watched her carefully. Do you need more time? No, Claire answered softly. I only need patience. She excused herself to refill a nearby table's water glasses before returning several minutes later with the same composed expression. Nathan checked his watch. 10 minutes remain. Claire nodded politely. I know. Daniel leaned closer to Nathan. Do you really believe she is guessing? Nathan answered quietly. Nobody stays this calm while guessing. Just then, the front door opened. A young woman hurried inside, brushing away the light rain from her coat. She turned slowly, scanning every table until her eyes landed on the elderly gentleman sitting alone near the window. His face brightened instantly. He stood with surprising energy as she rushed over and embraced him warmly. Several nearby guests smiled at the touching reunion. The old man laughed, wiping away quiet tears of relief before pulling out the empty chair across from him. Claire looked back toward Nathan. That was what you expected? He asked. She shook her head gently. Not exactly. I expected someone important to arrive for him. Nathan frowned. How? Claire answered with complete simplicity. He ordered 2 menus, even though he was dining alone. He declined to order until someone arrived. Every few minutes he looked toward the entrance instead of the dining room. His coffee had grown cold because he never touched it. People waiting for strangers checked their phones. People waiting for loved ones watched the door. Daniel slowly smiled. I never noticed any of that. Most people do not, Claire replied kindly. Nathan rested his elbows lightly on the table, his confidence beginning to shift into genuine curiosity. Claire had not predicted the future through luck. She had understood the present more deeply than anyone else in the room. For the first time that evening, Nathan found himself wondering whether the greatest advantage in business was not intelligence alone, but the quiet ability to truly see another human being before making a judgment about who they were. The atmosphere inside Blackstone House had changed so gradually that almost no one could identify the exact moment it happened. What had begun as quiet curiosity had evolved into genuine fascination. Diners who normally focused on business conversations or anniversary dinners now found themselves stealing occasional glances toward Nathan Brooks's table. The billionaire no longer appeared like the man directing the evening. Instead, he seemed to be listening more than speaking, a rare sight for anyone who knew his reputation. Nathan rested one hand against the polished table while Claire poured fresh coffee into Daniel's cup. "You have answered every challenge without making me feel challenged," Nathan said thoughtfully. "Most people try to prove they are the smartest person in the room." Claire set the coffee pot down with gentle precision. "That usually creates two losers instead of one winner." Daniel smiled. "That sounds like something a professor would say." Claire laughed softly. "No, just someone who has spent a long time watching conversations succeed and fail." Nathan studied her carefully. Every answer she gave felt surprisingly simple, yet somehow impossible to dismiss. He had expected confidence. He had expected hidden ambition. Instead, he found quiet clarity. "One final exercise before dessert," Nathan said. "No tricks. No impossible predictions." Claire nodded. "All right." Nathan reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a thick leather wallet. He placed it gently on the white tablecloth between them. Without opening it, "Tell me something about the owner." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Now that is unfair." Nathan smiled faintly. "I am curious how far observation can really go." Claire looked at the wallet but never touched it. Her attention shifted instead to Nathan's hands resting beside it. She noticed the faint indentation where the wallet usually remained in his jacket. She noticed the edges of the leather, polished by years of careful use rather than replaced by something newer. She remained silent for several moments before speaking. "You keep things much longer than people think." Nathan did not react. Claire continued. "Most billionaires replace accessories every season. This wallet has been repaired at least once instead of discarded. The stitching near the corner is slightly different from the original craftsmanship." Daniel leaned closer. Claire still had not lifted the wallet from the table. "You also carry very little cash," she continued. "Not because you do not need it, but because your schedule is planned almost minute by minute. Convenience matters more than appearance." Nathan slowly folded his hands together. "Go on." Claire's eyes rested briefly on the wallet before returning to Nathan's face. "There is something inside that has nothing to do with business. Something you never remove, even though you rarely look at it." Daniel blinked in surprise. Nathan's confident expression faded almost imperceptibly. "What makes you believe that?" Claire smiled gently. "Because people who organize every detail of their lives usually allow themselves exactly one exception. It reminds them who they were before success became their identity." Nathan looked down at the worn leather for several quiet seconds. Finally, without saying a word, he opened the wallet. Tucked carefully behind several credit cards and business cards was an old photograph with softened edges. It showed a much younger Nathan standing beside his late grandfather outside a small neighborhood hardware store. The photograph was nearly 20 years old. Daniel stared at it in astonishment before looking back at Claire. She had never seen the picture. She had never touched the wallet. Yet somehow she had recognized the invisible weight it carried. Nathan closed the wallet slowly, and for the first time since entering the restaurant, he found himself wondering whether Claire Bennett was revealing extraordinary perception or quietly protecting an extraordinary secret of her own. For the first time in many years, Nathan Brooks felt that a conversation was moving in a direction he could not predict. He had built companies by finding hidden patterns before anyone else recognized them. He had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions by reading hesitation in a handshake or confidence in a single sentence. Yet Claire Bennett continued to surprise him without ever trying to. She simply answered what was placed in front of her and returned to serving the restaurant with the same quiet professionalism that had defined every minute of the evening. Nathan watched as she carried two dessert plates toward a family celebrating a birthday. Before the young boy could reach for the chocolate cake, Claire placed a small candle at the center and whispered something that made the entire table smile. She stepped away immediately afterward, never waiting for applause or gratitude. Daniel noticed Nathan staring once again. "You are trying to solve her," he said. Nathan smiled faintly. "I solve everything eventually." "Are you sure this is something to solve?" Nathan did not answer. Instead, he reached for his phone beneath the table. His fingers moved quickly across the screen before he placed it face down beside his plate. The message was short. "Find everything you can about Claire Bennett. Employment history, education, family, social media, anything. Priority." Within seconds, a reply appeared. "Understood." Nathan slipped the phone back into his pocket before Claire returned with dessert. She placed a warm apple tart in front of Daniel and a dark chocolate souffle before Nathan. "Please be careful," she said with a gentle smile. "The center is still very warm." Nathan looked at the dessert, but asked a different question. "How long have you worked here?" "Almost 3 years. Do you enjoy it?" "Very much." "You never wanted something bigger?" Claire considered the question while adjusting the dessert spoon beside his plate. People often assume bigger means better. Nathan folded his hands together. "Does it not?" Claire glanced around the dining room. The elderly gentleman was now laughing with his granddaughter. The young entrepreneur she had encouraged earlier was proudly showing signed documents to his friends. A newly married couple quietly held hands near the windows while sharing one slice of cheesecake. "This room is filled with people celebrating moments they will remember for the rest of their lives," Claire said softly. "If I can make even one of those moments a little brighter, I think that matters more than most people realize." Nathan listened without interrupting. Her answer did not sound rehearsed. It sounded lived. Several minutes later, his phone vibrated discreetly. Nathan excused himself politely and walked toward the quiet hallway outside the dining room. He opened the secure report expecting the usual collection of predictable facts. Instead, he frowned. Claire Bennett, age 28. Current employment confirmed. Previous employment confirmed. Tax records normal. No significant public presence. No professional licenses. No notable awards. No interviews. No articles. No meaningful digital footprint. Nathan read the report twice. It felt strangely incomplete. In an age where nearly everyone left thousands of traces behind, Claire Bennett seemed to exist only where she chose to be seen. Nathan slowly lowered the phone. He had spent years believing that every secret eventually appeared on a screen somewhere. Yet standing alone beneath the soft hallway lights, he realized that the more he searched for Claire Bennett, the less he seemed to find. And for the first time that evening, the bet no longer felt like a game. It felt like the beginning of a mystery. When Nathan returned to the dining room, the warm light seemed different somehow. Nothing in Blackstone House had changed. Crystal glasses still reflected the chandeliers. The pianist continued playing soft jazz near the fireplace. Guests still smiled over coffee and dessert. Yet the report in Nathan's pocket had quietly unsettled something he had trusted for years. Every successful negotiation in his career had begun with information. This time, information had failed him. Claire was standing near the service station, carefully polishing a set of wine glasses before placing each one in perfect alignment. There was no performance in her movements. No attempt to appear mysterious. She looked exactly like someone who simply cared about doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. Nathan walked back to his table just as Claire approached with the check folder. "Are you ready for the final part of our agreement?" she asked gently. Nathan smiled. "I believe we are getting close." Claire placed the folder beside his plate, but made no effort to open it. "Would you like coffee?" "Only if you are willing to sit down for 5 minutes after your shift ends." Claire paused for the first time all evening. She glanced toward the dining room manager, who was helping another employee near the entrance. 5 minutes, she said. "Nothing more." Nathan nodded. "That is all I will ask." 20 minutes later, the last wave of dinner guests slowly disappeared into the cool Manhattan night. Chairs were quietly reset. Candles were replaced. The restaurant became almost peaceful. Claire removed her apron, folded it neatly, and joined Nathan at the small table near the window where the city lights shimmered across the rain-soaked streets. Daniel had already left, politely excusing himself after wishing them both a pleasant evening. A fresh pot of coffee rested between them. Neither spoke immediately. Nathan finally broke the silence. "I asked someone to look into your background." Claire looked at him calmly. "I assumed you would." Nathan laughed softly. "You are not even surprised. People who build companies usually collect information before they make decisions." Nathan leaned forward. "The strange part is that there was almost nothing to find." Claire wrapped both hands around the warm coffee cup without lifting it. "That depends on where someone chooses to look." Nathan studied her expression. There was no defensiveness, no embarrassment, only quiet honesty. "Who are you really, Claire?" She looked through the rain-covered window before answering. "Several years ago, I believed that achievement was the most important thing in life. I collected degrees, certificates, awards, and titles because I thought each one would make me more valuable." Nathan remained completely silent. "Then my mother became seriously ill. Her voice stayed steady, but softer now. Everything changed very quickly. Promotions stopped mattering. Prestige stopped mattering. The only thing that mattered was being present. Nathan listened carefully. I left the career everyone expected me to pursue. I stepped away from a life that looked impressive on paper because someone I loved needed me more than my resume did. She smiled gently. After she recovered, people kept asking when I planned to return to my old life. I realized something unexpected. Nathan quietly asked, "What was that?" Claire looked directly into his eyes. I already had. The only difference was that everyone else had been measuring my life by my job title instead of my character. Nathan felt the words settle over the quiet room like the final notes of a song. In that moment, he realized the secret he had been searching for was not hidden in financial records, university transcripts, or online databases. Claire Bennett had not disappeared from the world. She had simply stopped chasing the kind of success that the world found easiest to recognize. The rain had almost stopped by the time their coffee cups were nearly empty. Outside, the streets of Manhattan reflected the city lights like scattered pieces of glass, while inside Blackstone House the staff quietly finished preparing the restaurant for another busy day ahead. Neither Nathan nor Claire seemed eager to leave. The conversation had become something neither of them expected when the evening began. Nathan rested both hands around his coffee cup before speaking again. "When I offered $100,000, you never looked interested." Claire smiled softly. "Because I was never trying to win your money." "Then why accept the bet?" Nathan asked. Claire looked toward the empty dining room where every chair had been carefully returned beneath its table. "Because I thought you deserved an honest answer to the question you never asked." Nathan frowned slightly. What question was that? Claire met his eyes with the same quiet confidence she had shown throughout the evening. "Whether success has changed the way you see people." Nathan leaned back, letting the words settle. For years he had believed the bet was about proving whether first impressions were reliable. Only now did he realize Claire had never accepted that version of the challenge. She had been answering an entirely different question from the beginning. "You never tried to impress me," Nathan admitted. "No. You never defended your choices." "There was nothing to defend. And you never once asked me for anything." Claire shook her head gently. "Respect that has to be requested rarely lasts very long." Nathan laughed quietly, though there was humility in the sound rather than amusement. "Do you know what surprises me the most?" Claire waited patiently. "Every person I meet wants something from me. An investment, a recommendation, a donation, a meeting, a favor. Tonight you had every opportunity to ask for something, and you never did." Claire traced one finger lightly along the rim of her cup before answering. "That is because I already have the things I value most." Nathan looked at her with genuine curiosity, such as time with the people I love, meaningful work, peace when I go to sleep at night, the freedom to decide who I become tomorrow. She smiled. "Money can support those things. It cannot replace them." Nathan lowered his eyes for a brief moment. He thought about the countless flights, board meetings, investor calls, and celebrations he had attended over the years. He had collected achievements with remarkable discipline, yet somewhere along the way he had quietly started measuring other people by the same standards he used to measure himself. Claire had not challenged his intelligence. She had challenged the assumptions beneath it. At last Nathan reached inside his jacket and removed the checkbook he always carried during important negotiations. He carefully wrote the promised amount, signed his name, and slid the check across the table. Claire looked at it for only a second before gently sliding it back. Nathan blinked in surprise. "You won." "That was never the prize," Claire answered. "Keep your promise instead." Nathan looked at her with quiet confusion. "Which promise?" Claire's smile was warm but unmistakably sincere. "The one you did not realize you made when you accepted the bet. The next time you meet someone wearing a uniform instead of a tailored suit, give them the same attention you gave me tonight before deciding who they are. If you can do that consistently, then I will know I truly won." Nathan looked at the untouched check resting between them and understood, perhaps for the first time in his life, that the most valuable lesson he had ever received came from someone who had never wanted to teach one. Nathan looked at the unsigned check one last time before quietly tearing it from the checkbook and placing it back inside his jacket. For the first time in years, walking away without spending money did not feel like losing an opportunity. It felt like finally understanding one. He stood from the table and offered Claire a sincere smile. one completely different from the confident grin he had worn earlier that evening. "Thank you," he said. Claire looked slightly surprised. "For what?" Nathan glanced around the now peaceful restaurant. "For refusing to let me buy the lesson." Claire laughed softly. Some things become less valuable the moment they have a price. They walked together toward the front entrance where the night manager was locking the glass doors. Before leaving, Nathan paused beside the empty dining room. Every table now looked ordinary again. The candles had burned low. The piano was silent. The polished silverware reflected only the soft lights overhead. Yet to Nathan, the room no longer looked the same. Earlier that evening, he had seen employees serving customers. Now he saw dozens of people quietly carrying responsibilities, hopes, families, and stories that no tailored suit or expensive watch could ever reveal. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. Cool autumn air filled the street as black sedans waited along the curb. Nathan's driver stepped forward and opened the rear door, but Nathan did not enter immediately. He turned back toward Claire, who stood beneath the warm light spilling from the restaurant entrance. She looked exactly as she had when the evening began. Simple black coat, quiet smile, calm eyes. Nothing about her appearance had changed. Only his perception had. "I almost forgot," Nathan said. Claire tilted her head slightly. "Forgot what?" Nathan extended his hand. "Congratulations. You won the bet." Claire accepted the handshake with gentle confidence. "I hope we both did." Nathan nodded slowly. "I believe we did." During the following weeks, subtle changes began appearing inside Brooks Dynamics. Executive meetings no longer started the moment Nathan entered the room. Instead, he greeted the reception staff by name before taking the elevator upstairs. He began asking custodians how their families were doing. He learned the names of security officers who had quietly protected the building for years without ever expecting recognition. During interviews, he spent less time looking at resumes and more time listening to stories. Several executives noticed the difference. Daniel noticed it most of all. One afternoon he smiled and asked, "What happened to the man who thought every conversation was a negotiation?" Nathan looked through the office window toward the busy streets below before answering. He met someone who reminded him that every conversation is also an opportunity to understand another human being. Months later, Nathan returned to Blackstone House on another quiet Thursday evening. He requested the same corner table. The manager greeted him warmly, but when Nathan looked across the dining room, Claire was not there. She had moved on, leaving only kind memories among the staff who spoke about her with genuine admiration. The manager handed Nathan a small envelope that Claire had left behind several weeks earlier with instructions to give it to him only if he ever returned. Inside was a simple handwritten note. It read, "Never underestimate the people the world overlooks. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is carrying the loudest wisdom." Nathan folded the note carefully and placed it inside the same worn wallet that still held his grandfather's photograph. He smiled as he looked around the restaurant one last time. The bet had ended months ago, but its greatest reward continued to grow every single day. Because true wealth is not measured by what a person can afford to buy. It is measured by how deeply they choose to see the people standing quietly in front of them.